Yes, thank you very much, everyone, for attending. This is our third event in our Net Zero Power Hour, and it's Carbon Cutting Milton Keynes. We were going to have an SME within Milton Keynes with us, but very unfortunately, through two very good reasons, they had to pull out very last minute. But that's okay. So we won't be taking the full hour, you'll be glad to know. But yes, as I said, if anyone wants to interrupt me as I go, feel free. Okie doke. Can everyone see my PowerPoint? If not, let me know, but I'll assume you can. Superb. Okay, so in today's session, we'll be discussing Milton Keynes and net zero a little bit. It will be relevant to those out of Milton Keynes as well. Do some books comparisons as well there. Offsetting and some watch-outs. This is on the back of what many businesses have been kind of inquiring about, certainly with recent news. What you can do beyond offsetting. So, you know, there's this kind of greenwashing, little bit of controversy at the moment with offsetting. That's not to say I don't agree with it. Offsetting really has its place, but we'll look what else can you do as well as offsetting to kind of achieve the same goals. We had a budget yesterday, and of course, energy was a big part of that budget. So I'll just go through what was kind of mentioned and what impacts that will have on you, the businesses. And then next steps on your road to net zero. We're coming to the end of the Net Zero MK program, or this iteration of it. So that's kind of just some little steps you can take in your kind of future journey. So yes, and then a little Q&A. But as I said before, feel free to interrupt me as we go. Right, firstly then, let's kick things off. I've got a little graph here, and it's not too confusing at all. It's just looking at the annual CO2 emissions per square kilometre. It's a comparison between 2005 and 2019. So the top line you can see, the blue one is Milton Keynes, the red one is Bucks. Now, what's important here is not to focus too much on the fact that Milton Keynes is 6.2 and Bucks is 2.4. As you all know, Milton Keynes, it's a much more dense area than Buckinghamshire, so it will naturally have to have more emissions. We recognise that, don't we? Buckinghamshire has a lot more green area within its borders. That the density is much lower. What's important here is the reduction, the proportion of reduction. So included within these is kind of large industrial sites, railways, land use, and an important one, motorways that pass through local authorities, not necessarily controlled by those authorities, but that pass through. They still count towards a county's or an area's emissions. So the focus, as I said, should be on the reduction, not the original net position. So what we can see is Milton Keynes have reduced by about 31%. Buckinghamshire has reduced by about 32%, and the average reductions across the country are 36%. So why is this important? Well, it's important because this is very much what we've done between 2005 and 2019. So a third of emissions effectively have been removed since 2005 to 2019. So progress is being made. It's really important to recognise that. I think we often see ourselves as being at the starting block, but naturally as time goes on, we know that energy becomes more efficient in the way it's created. And in turn, that means year on year, even at default, you should be becoming more carbon neutral as a result, even with no actions due to kind of the decarbonisation of the grid, the energy grid. Okay, so what did we find when we undertook this programme? Well, from all the businesses we've kind of looked at within Milton Keynes, we've crunched the numbers, and what you can see there, proportions by emission types, are very much the average business in Milton Keynes. So we were, this is kind of businesses going between 20 and 80 employees, I think is kind of the range we're looking at here. You can see waste 4%, energy consumption 19%, transport 34%, and products and services. So this is kind of all of your purchases, it's what you offer, it's everything else really, 43%. So how does that compare to the national picture? Well, as you can see, for waste, the national average for businesses is to have about 15% of their emissions related to their waste. So that's, over 3 times, 3.5 times what we're seeing with businesses in Milton Keynes. But this kind of, if we think about it, there's a logic to this. Those businesses in Milton Keynes, they're high tech. We don't have the biggest manufacturers in kind of the UK there. We've got some, of course, but it's, it's not kind of a focus point like, say, the Black Country. Energy use on general is around 43% of a business's emissions. So again, we've got under 1/5 of our emissions within Milton Keynes businesses as being from energy consumption. This fits that same narrative around, those big manufacturers use a lot of energy. If you can, many of our businesses have kind of hybrid working with home workers, which greatly reduces kind of energy use there. So again, that just supports what we know. And transport about 20% on national average. Right, well, we're quite over that, aren't we, with 34%. It isn't surprising. This is absolutely in line with Buckinghamshire, that transport is actually one of the biggest emission sources, and that is certainly the same in Milton Keynes. This is promising stuff, though, because transport, as we move forward, will be an easier one to combat and tackle. So actually, if this is where a good proportion is, that's not a bad thing. Waste being at 4% is really strong, but that's very much, the sectors we're dealing with. So highest emitting activities from MK businesses. So what we've got there, you can see, is the 6 top highest sources of emissions for businesses that kind of worked with us and have undertaken carbon calculations and carbon audits. Products purchased, so this is everything from furniture, electronics, your stock. That's all products purchased. So that accounts for 19%. Delivery mileage is the next biggest emitter, really, large there at 15%. Again, shows that perhaps we don't do as much of the front end manufacturing, but more that last mile delivery, and that's where that 15% is coming from. Events, 11%, so really happy we could capture this as part of our footprinting software. The fact that we accounted for businesses' events that they put on and accounted for all emissions from all delegates, so all people who attended those events. And unsurprisingly, that accounts for 1/10 of emissions. Next, we've got electricity and gas, which coincidentally both have 9%. So that's, as you all know, the gas and electricity you use on site, and the employee commute. Really, really impressed with this, that businesses have taken it upon themselves to include their employees' commutes within their footprints. So these are traditionally called Scope 3, which we will go on to in a little brief summary. But effectively, it is not necessary, or rather, the jury is still out on whether a business should be capturing employee commutes. Some may say, well, actually, for an employee to get to a business, that's their emissions. They're going to their job. They're getting paid for that work, so they choose where they live relative to their job. Theoretically, of course, it's not real life. Then other employees have said, no, you know what? We recognise that all of this activity is the result of us existing, and we want to reach out and support our employees in that endeavour and offset their carbon. And as I said, that accounted for 8%, so really high. That is very, very high. Again, going back to that, perhaps the fact we don't consume we haven't got power hungry plant and machinery going. And again, I must say, I know we've got Phil from the aerospace sector, so this is not relevant necessarily to you. I think your profile will be a really interesting one, Phil, when we come round to do it. But yeah, this accounts in total for 70% of emissions recorded across the programme. So put another way, if as a business you could focus on these 6 areas, and I know that it's not as simple as that, but potentially compared to the average Milton Keynes SME, you could account for potentially up to 70% of your emissions. Of course, you couldn't reduce by 70%, but each of these subcategories you could reduce, you know, and you only have to look at them to simply think, well, I could think of a couple of ways we could tackle some of these, not all of them, of course. Really interesting that just over a third of SMEs on the programme accounted for flying emissions. This was higher than I thought it would be, and it's actually higher than the average for a standard SME. So that's 1 in 3 businesses have flying as part of their kind of business activity. Of course, sometimes that's necessary. It's very easy to, oh, flying's bad, but you know, we're very aware that practically as businesses, what options are the well as the trains. We all know of the difficulties there, don't we? There's driving by car, depending, but it might not be national journeys. But that's a real good point to consider, I think. I just thought it was quite a novel one. 4 out of 5 businesses accounted for working from home emissions. So again, this is kind of reaching out and taking responsibility, because when our employees work from home, much as we're working, well, I'm certainly working from home now, if anyone else is lucky to be in the same position. But of course, I'm using my electricity, but technically I'm using that for Net Zero MK to deliver this programme. So it could be argued, well, if I was in an office, those emissions would be the responsibility of, you know, Ngage, which is the company I work for. So we have to ask, well, by that same kind of definition, then, would we also extend that to when people are working from home? Well, it turns out 80% of businesses that signed up felt it was part of their remit. What's nice about this is you can report this, you can report that you're doing this. So there's often, you know, a lot of skepticism when people come to do their carbon footprint, but actually, if you're accounting for employee emissions at home, that I think that's a really strong selling point for what you're doing. So if you do it, it's the kind of thing you can promote. And of these companies, this counted for 7% of total emissions. So of these 4/5 who have working from home, 7% of those companies' total emissions were for home working. The reason that's interesting is because that's actually quite low. Yet if 4/5 of business are doing it, it kind of recognises that when we work from home, actually our emissions really are reduced. Of course, we do have the issue with heating in winter time, and you know, there's a discussion there which is more efficient, but it does seem that home working has become, or remote working, I should say, or a hybrid approach with a shared office space perhaps, you know, does have big benefits when it comes to saving on carbon. Of course, some businesses just simply can't operate that way, and that's absolutely reasonable. It's about finding what works for you in your sector. Scopes 1, 2, and 3. So people kind of think, oh, scopes 1, 2, and 3, and they kind of can keel over when they see this, and that's fine. I'm not going to go too heavy here at all. Simply, what I will say is scopes 1, 2, and 3 account for all emissions, all activity that a business undertakes. So if a company does scopes 1, 2, and 3, it's accounting for everything, both within its business site and premises, and also outwardly to its employees and to its consumers or to its customer base. Scope 1 is for company vehicle use and gas use. Scope 2 is for purchased electric, some gas and heating and cooling. Scope 3, which is the really difficult one, is purchased goods, services, business air travel, employee commuting, waste disposal, use of sold products, transportation, and of course distribution up and down streams. Also investments, which is a really quirky one to think about. So scopes 1 and 2 will become mandatory eventually. None of these are mandatory for an SME. It may be, though, it may be the case that you have businesses that are required to do this because their customer base are dictating it. We're seeing that more and more. So that could be the case. But there's no kind of compulsory necessity for SMEs to do this. So why do it? Well, obviously, what we say in Net Zero MK is if you can't account for it, you can't control it. So if you don't know what your emissions are, well, it's actually very difficult to reduce them. You know, without knowing where your starting point is, how can you really capture those success stories and, you know, the good news stories that people want to know about? So yes, that's scopes 1, 2, and 3. Some companies will say, oh, we've just done scopes 1 and 2. The reason for that is scope 3 is just far more in depth. I think scope 3 has about 15 different subcategories that cover all activity within the business and kind of, as I said, your employees and consumers. Scope 3 is something that it's not an all or nothing, which people often think, well, I can't capture all of that, so I can't do it. Well, why not do a quarter of it or a tenth of it? There is nothing wrong with that. The most important part is that when you sell your story, when you come to tell people your story and where you're at, you just simply tell them what you've accounted for. You're very transparent. And if you say, okay, we've accounted for our employee commutes and home working when they do work from home, but we've not been able to do our supply chain because it, you know, of course, it would take a lot more time and effort and energy, and that might be something that you plan in the medium term. Well, that's okay. It's a great starting point, and I can tell you, once you start, every single business will tell you the same who has started their journey, that actually once you start it, it really is pretty practical and easy to do. We move away from the science in a lot of ways, because I think you can kind of get empowered a lot quicker if we just get that knowledge across in a practical way. Okay, so how did it look in MK? So scopes 1, 28%, scopes 2, 9%, and scope 3, 63%. So you could say scopes 1 and 2 are very much kind of energy use on site to make it simple, and scope 3 is, you know, and also in scopes 1 and 2 kind of company business miles. Scope 3 is everything on the periphery. What I can tell you nationally is we know that normally a business, about 90% of their emissions would be in scope 3. So that's not the case in Milton Keynes. And what that could tell us, and likely does tell us, is that we've not accounted for all scope 3 within Milton Keynes. These businesses, and we know this because we've assisted them, they've done, as I said, some have done a quarter of it, 50%, some have done it all. But the point is, nationally, or if a company was to take account of all of its emissions, you would expect to see scope 3 at about 90%. So it really is considerable. And another way of saying this, if you're only focusing on scopes 1 and 2, which is perfectly reasonable to do, just understand that might only be 10% of what your actual impact is. Might not be, but it could be up to that. And of course, that would really change things. So yes, up to 90% of emissions from scope 3. And kind of another way of saying it, what I've just alluded to, we effectively think that perhaps 70% of scope 3 wasn't captured when we came to capture it. So we've only captured about a quarter of our MK businesses scope 3. So if you find this difficult, you're not alone. You know, you're certainly not alone. It follows the national picture. You will hear time and time again, scope 3 as being kind of the problem child of the scopes. It's a really difficult one, but it's kind of, it is where all of that data sits. Right, okay, going to move on to offsetting now. So I'm very, very rarely a pessimist. Anyone will tell you that you can't be being an environmentalist, can you? Unfortunately, we've had some really controversial headlines coming out recently with regards to carbon offsetting. So, of course, carbon offsetting is where you effectively fund another program to offset carbon that you have created elsewhere. The simplest way we know people can do this is by planting a tree. You plant a tree, it of course absorbs that carbon dioxide, embeds it into the wood, and in turn, a business can then use that carbon elsewhere. And the concept is, well, it balances out. This was an article that the Guardian released, I think it was last week, and they basically said that 90% of Verra's Offsets, who are the largest offsetting organisation in the world, 90% are considered to be worthless. It's really heart-wrenching because people have invested hundreds of millions with Verra, and you know, obviously, much as many have said, many people who are very critical of offsetting, the fact that this can't be watched closely means that, you know, where it can be taken advantage of, it probably will be taken advantage of. Now, I really don't want the message that you go away with to be offsetting is bad. We offset as an organisation, and I absolutely think it has, you know, an important role to play within the decarbonisation journey. It's something that all of us will have to do. However, we really have to walk that tightrope, I guess. So these are just some little tips from me. I'm also happy if anyone wants to pick a conversation up with regards to this. I'll say it has been one of the biggest points we've been asked about by businesses, which is why we've brought it in to this kind of event. So the market is saturated with brokers. Choose a well-established offsetting company. Every week I see about 3 new carbon offsetting brokers. So what they're doing is simply setting up a website for you to pay them, for them to pay someone who pays someone else to do a program potentially elsewhere in the world. You know, the level of disconnect there is so great that, for one, the fees you're paying, of course, will get stripped down and stripped down and stripped down by each person who kind of has a hand in the pie there. And ultimately that won't go to offsetting projects. Are you being offered a monthly fee to offset? So I'll be really specific here. You may go online, and if you do a little Google and, you know, type in how can we offset for our business, that kind of thing, you'll find these great kind of turnkey solutions. They say, don't worry about it. They say, pay us £30, £50, £500 a month. It can be any amount. They take very, very loose kind of high level estimates. They'll perhaps ask you 5 very, very general questions and then give you and say, fine, just pay this and you're offset. That simply doesn't wash. That doesn't work. That's not accounting for emissions. That's more really throwing some cash at a fixed rate in the hopes that, well, that has done it. Unfortunately, it isn't that easy. So if anyone is telling you it's that easy, I'd wonder what their motivation was there in getting you to sign up. You should be offsetting the tons that you create. So if you create 20 tons, you offset 20 tons that year. How cheap is too cheap? So we're brilliant. This is what we do as business, right? We find the most competitive offer out there, best value for money. It's really important that we don't consider the lowest cost here to be the key driver. It's finding the right project, because if you invest in the wrong project, well, actually you may be having no impact at all. Now you can see the projects that you will be supporting whenever you offset. You can see that final destination. There's projects all over the world. There are some projects in the UK. Of course, it's better to get one in the UK if you can. They're far more expensive, and of course, very in demand, and the supply just isn't there. So this is why many are done in developing countries. It's also far easier in developing countries to set them up cost effectively, rightfully or wrongfully. I feel it's the right thing to do, but don't just think the cheaper the better. This point, if you're going to take one point on offsetting, is the main one. Go for a gold standard supported project or program. So the headline above is with regards to the verified carbon standard. They don't have gold standard for those offsetting projects. Gold standard takes more steps in making sure that the money is going where it is stated to go, but beyond the carbon savings, for gold standard, there are usually additional benefits. So, for instance, it could be social benefits for those communities. It could be, you know, helping women to become empowered with work in these developing countries. So some really good projects, or clean drinking water. That's another one that's quite a common one. Ultimately, though, the easiest way to cut emissions is to stop them before they're created. I guess it's not the easiest. I guess it certainly, you can appreciate if you kind of attack this at source, well, you don't have to deal, or you mitigate against how much you have to deal with offsetting. But of course, you will need to offset, or rather you will have emissions. We won't all turn net zero in a couple of years. You know, the government are talking about 2050, aren't they? And what are we in now, 2023? So we have some time to go. You want to act soon, don't get me wrong, but we're not suggesting here that, you know, next year you're going to be net zero. Okay, so what can you do beyond offsetting? So for your environmental and social goals. So beyond offsetting, what can we do that perhaps we do have a bit more faith in, that we don't think perhaps is greenwashing and won't be as controversial to customers or can't be picked at? So business premises are a great place to start. So we talk about tree planting, you know, protecting in the Amazon, which of course is important, very difficult to keep an eye on or have any kind of control there. But many of our businesses actually have land, appropriate land, to make some little interventions. So encouraging biodiversity on the premises, which can make a far stronger statement than offsetting. So kind of you can see those wildflowers there. Buying wild seed flower is very reasonable. Businesses more and more across the country are doing this. If you've just got a little plot, this is a really kind of multi-benefited approach. You know, it aesthetically it's nice, the customers see it, it's something that if you share on social media, it's not going to get, you know, any bad press, is it? Everyone who sees thinks that, well, they're making it a nicer area locally for us to live. Just kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Increases your asset value, perhaps not much with wildflower, but you know, it really improves an area. And there's a lot, you'll have ideas, you know, you might have your own partners or organizations that you can work with that may have this, and you can say, well, look, could we do this on your land? Could we invest on your land? Of course, there's always the risk that that could go in the future, it could be removed, but those benefits are going to be pretty fast. Is there an opportunity to support the local community? I know we have a couple of members who are actually attending at the moment at this event who are very strong proponents of their local community and support the local organisations and charities. Again, this one is one that's it's straightforward. It's investing locally, it's supporting locally, and that in turn will benefit you. Directly supporting local charities with donations, that's a quick and easy one, but again, this all fits into the same agenda, and you might want to earmark that money for something. You might say, well, look, we could give you this money if you could do this with it. We have a lot of, you know, nature groups within the counties, within Buckinghamshire, within MK, so can we get them involved? If they had money, what could they do with that money? And it could be that your name can be on that, so it's really worth thinking out the box beyond offsetting. And of course, reinvest the money you would spend on offsetting into your own energy savings. So decarbonising, getting more efficient machinery, you know, LEDs, you name it. Okay, that's enough for offsetting then. Moving on now, we had the budget yesterday, didn't we? Which I know we all waited for with bated breath, but kind of the thing that excites me most and makes me sit up when Jeremy Hunt is talking is when he comes to the energy. So yes, what was mentioned when it comes to energy across the country? Well, headline was a kind of 20 billion to be used for investment in supporting carbon capture and carbon storage technologies. This is a, you know, great, doesn't help many people in the room, but what this is doing is recognizing that we need offsetting. We need the opportunity to offset within the UK. That way it can be regulated really tightly. You know, we're far closer to that endpoint, and you know, again, it's a case that it's not shifting it to another part of the world. It's going to support 50,000 jobs, capture 20 to 30 million tonnes of CO2e. If you ever see the E after CO2, that's equivalent. So CO2e is just saying CO2 and equivalent gases. It's just an easy way than me listing all the gases. Nuclear will now be classified on par with renewable energy. I won't give any opinion on this one, other than to say changing the name of something or changing how you categorize it isn't really a practical step. That's just changing the name or viewing it slightly differently. So that one I'll just leave hanging. Really brilliant, the 100% tax relief deduction on assets. We've seen this before for environmental purchases. So where, for instance, someone might have bought a heat pump, they can offset that. Again, they can get tax relief effectively, and 50% will be in year one. So no better time to invest like the present. For home workers and employees, the energy price guarantee has been extended for 3 months. So if you have any home workers, hybrid workers, or your employees just caring about what they've got going on in their personal lives in terms of their utility bills, this fortunately has been frozen. And when I say frozen at 2,500, as we know, that means the average household. So that's not necessarily to say you will spend that, or you may spend over that. But the thing here is, well, how about businesses? That's great for the homeowner. What about businesses? Well, this one is the real kicker. Unfortunately, the energy bill relief scheme for SMEs will not be extended beyond 31st of March. This is something we've really fought for at BBF Ngage, and support that being continued, of course, to assist our businesses in the now until those wholesale prices come down. Effectively, the government have said this will be replaced with the energy bills discount scheme. Keyword there is discount. It's really difficult to know what impacts this will have, but it is an absolute fact that it will be detrimental. The opportunity, the savings will not be nowhere near as great as the subsidies that have been provided to date for businesses. So it will support less than 70% of SMEs in any kind of support. I think the real term, the last report I read, the real term impact of this will be about the removal of 80% of the support. So effectively, it's being just eradicated. I really wanted this to be extended alongside, the domestic dwelling space, but unfortunately, that's just not to be. So this is something. I think the FSB reported that 4% of businesses won't be able to pay their energy bills at the end of this month, and prices will go up again. So it really is a dire situation. And I would say when we see manufacturers and they up their rates quite significantly, we really, as awful as it is, we have to understand that the position they're in is, well, it's really dire. So it'll put further immediate strain on those on variable contracts. Okay, so let's look ahead now. Let's look ahead, setting your focus. So many people have undertaken the carbon footprints. We might have more coming down the line, those who haven't, so watch this space. But people, kind of think once they've done their footprint, well, what do we do next? Well, it's all about looking into the future. You're going to get really, really overwhelmed if you start thinking about 2050 or 2040 or 2030. Whenever you want to be net zero, it's really going to seem overwhelming. And as you all know, in all your businesses, the easiest way to do this is start with the simple stuff. Start with the stuff that doesn't take much investment, and go from there. Get those the low hanging fruit, get the quick wins. This will really galvanize the team. It will let you see just how much you can do with that, with a little action. And it'll also help you get a better understanding and a grasp of the scopes and what you're expected to do, in the long term. So I've just kind of plotted a couple of different interventions on here. This is, abstract, of course. It's for you and for your business. It might not come out the same as my business comes out, depending, what sector you work in. So it's worth this being undertaken. It doesn't just have to be undertaken by one person or by you, getting the employees involved or the right employees involved, because that really helps strengthen it. And again, it galvanizes the troops, doesn't it? Quick mention on the climate commitment. We've really got to push this, certainly in Milton Keynes City Council, who are the funders of this programme, which we're very grateful for, of course. They've set their commitment to be net zero by 2030. And this, it's a spectacular achievement if they make it, and it's a real phenomenal goal to set. Where we are currently, I appreciate that for many businesses, the very idea of setting a net zero target in 7 years it will be far too overwhelming, and your priorities at the moment are very much on survival, with all the hardships that you're currently facing. So I'm not going to preach about why you need to be net zero, nor am I going to say, oh, aim for 2030. Phenomenal if you can, and I'll be the first one to applaud you and promote you. But any steps you take here are great. We as an organisation, that being Ngage BBF, have currently set a net zero target of 2050, and in turn that means we have to halve emissions by 2030. Far more realistic, and actually when you go at that low-hanging fruit, it's really surprising how quickly you can cut it down by 50%, or at least plan for that over this, over the 20s, this current decade. Yeah, so you can do that if you want to be in line with Milton Keynes City Council. It's fantastic. And of course, when you make this commitment, you can make it and you can change the commitment. If you want to commit to 2050 and in the future you think, you know what, we could do this by 2040. Brilliant. That's absolutely superb. Nothing wrong with that whatsoever. Right, going to go to some next steps now. So if you haven't already, check out Business Climate Hub. See your commitment to net zero. So that SME commitment you've just seen, the climate commitment, all of these are captured on the Business Climate Hub. There's no cost here. There's no legal obligation to do this, and nor is there a legal obligation for you to hit net zero with whatever you commit as your carbon target. It's not about that. It's not about proving at this very moment where that will come from. It's about sending that signal that you get it and you're willing to sign up to this, and you will take steps to get your emissions halved at least by 2030. And whilst it's not, mandatory now, I'm sure we all kind of know there will come a year very soon where all of a sudden it will be mandatory. And how better if you've got perhaps 1 year, 2 year of carbon footprints already done. That level of data is going to put you in a much better position than thinking, crikey, we've got to catch up now and make these savings even quicker. Share this commitment with everyone, employees and customers alike. You can nominate a net zero champion if you wish within your organisation. They don't have to be a champion. They can, whatever you want to call them, but effectively give someone the role, empower someone, because you'll find there will be someone in your company. It may very well be you, but there may be someone else who would be perfect for this. And actually, if you give them the challenge, they're really going to go at it. Equally, it's worth thinking, when it comes from a colleague rather than the management, perhaps it's, you're going to be less defensive. Some interventions, of course, mean we have to change the way we work, which can always be controversial because we all know better than anyone how to do our own jobs, right? But yeah, having someone there, and also it takes a bit of the burden from you. Yeah, so plan short and medium-term actions, focusing initially on the easiest, most affordable steps. We saw that before in the graph, but really don't overwhelm yourself. Don't think, right, how are we going to make our supply chain completely carbon neutral? Do that, but first, look at your business premises and that kind of thing, because that's directly in your control. So it's going to be far easier to achieve really meaningful wins. And then outline those longer-term strategic aims that can act as a compass to drive you forward. And of course, you tweak this plan as you go. But this is kind of the approach you're going to be doing. And as we've said, consider offsetting your remaining emissions with gold standard offsets, or equally, support the local community as your kind of your commitment, recognizing the emissions, the impact, the damage that your business is having, on the planet. Okay, we've got 5 more of the £250 vouchers. These are effectively for Milton Keynes businesses only. I'm very, very sad to say, but they're really easy to get. Basically, we just need an email. Well, you get in touch with us, ask what you want to buy. If it's like a smart thermostat, LEDs, it could be, infrared panel. Really, really flexible here. It could be draft excluders. If there's anything that can help you, smart plugs, anything that can help you, we can help fund it. It's fully funded and it's £250. All we require after the fact is an email order confirmation. Once we get that and your bank details, we'll send you the £250. Mike's details are there. Alternative Mike's works within my team, and you can reach out to me if not Mike. But effectively, we can get that money. There's 1 week left though to get them, and then they won't be about anymore. So it's free money. So really, you know, take it. We do finally have the low carbon workspaces grant across Buckinghamshire, Milton Keynes, and you know, the surrounding counties. This can provide up to 45% off interventions. So this could help if you're buying solar, for instance, for £10,000. We could give you £4,500 towards it. It's really high level of funding. What I would say though is we're on the road to closure now, and we will not be getting an extension on this programme. So if you have not taken advantage of the low carbon workspaces programme, I really implore you to. This is the kind of the final wave of European funding money. And after this, and we end in June, but that's complete wrap up. So this money will not be about in the future, and central government will be very unlikely, the signals we're getting, that they are going to be putting a lot of money in these kind of capital projects. It's going to focus more on advice. So if you know, I think with our grant, the return on investment for solar is like 3.5 years, and with a 25-year shelf life, it really is a no-brainer. So if you're interested in that, again, get back in touch with me. We're online. I won't go on about it, but got a bunch of resources as well that you can tap into. Thank you so much. I said I wouldn't be taking the full hour. I've taken a bit of time there. Thank you very much as well. I know we had some technical issues at the start, so I'm really grateful that you've all persisted, those who are here. You've all persisted and stayed with us. We're really grateful. As I said, this was recorded, so the event will go out across to our members, and we do see quite a large kind of uptake of those videos. Equally, check out our previous videos. We had the Overcoming Your Energy Fears, which was really kind of a practical look at, you know, the situation we're in regarding energy bills, and stop wasting your waste. Very much about waste management. That was quite a fun one. Got some nice novel outcomes there. So again, check that out. Right, I'm really happy for questions now. I'm happy for any feedback, comments. If anyone thinks I don't like something you said, or anyone's got an idea better than mine, most people do. So I really want to hear it. Or maybe you want to share what you're doing on the ground, what you're proud of. So yeah, let's open the floor up for any questions. You don't need to humour me and make up questions, but feel free to ask.
Yeah, Daniel, I've got a question.
Please, Phil.
Right, so you talk about the solar panels. Now, having investigated a little bit, I can see that if we were to purchase renewable energy, 100% renewable energy,
yeah,
there's no carbon emissions from that. Is that correct?
That is correct. It would be zero. So if you used 10,000 kilowatt hours of energy, of electric created through your own solar, that would be a zero. So the only emissions that could exist there is and I won't go too complex with this, but the embedded carbon. So of course, when you buy anything, as you know, carbon has been used to create that product. So when you have solar panels, those solar panels will have carbon, and that was created from their production. But you class them as scope 3, it's voluntary, and it would only be in year 1. Of course, solar far exceeds, the benefits, the carbon saved far exceed embedded carbon. But yes, Phil, the concept, you've got it exactly right. It's zero.
Yes, but my other question to that is, if I'm looking at when we renew our electricity contract, go for a 100% renewable, because you can get them. So effectively, if we sign for a contract that's 100% renewable, it's the same thing. There's no carbon emissions to it, we've been told.
Yes. Yes. So from a
question is, though, if I've done that and then we are interested in putting some solar panels on our warehouse, is there any point?
Yeah, I understand your question. You're saying because we've already on paper saved that carbon.
Yeah.
There's two ways to answer that. from a technical point of view, is there a point, will it reduce my footprint? No, you're quite right that actually, if you maintained a renewable contract forever, that would equally be zero emissions. There's a couple of hang-ups there, though. One is the supply and demand of renewable energy. And as we move forward, that demand will only grow greater, and we've seen the difficulties when it comes to energy security in our future. So having it on your own business, of course, makes you energy resilient, and really importantly with solar, and more important, I can say, understanding you as businesses, most importantly, that return on investment and that energy security really is valuable. But no, in answer, Phil, it's a really good question. From a technical point of view, they would appear one in the same. The only difference being as well, you know when your solar produces energy that it has produced that energy. Yeah, but very good question, Phil. Very good question. And remember, we've got the low carbon workspaces grants as well.
And do you feel that technology at the moment is solar panels do work?
Oh, Phil, honestly, I cannot tell you enough how much I've tried to get so many businesses over the line on this with funding. It really is one of the strongest steps you can take. And I can say that all businesses who have this opportunity for solar, who have the right space to install solar, will do it in the end. The only difference will be there will not be government support for this. They'll know you will be pressured into getting it effectively. So really good point. And what I would say is they're also worth giving a clean. People forget this, domestic as well. People think, well, you know, they're good, that's it, you can leave them. Obviously, any dirt, any kind of anything that breaks that link between the panel and the sun will reduce what you get. So they're always worth a wipe off, like every, I don't know, like 6 to 12 months. 12 months is fine, but you certainly want to be doing them manually. But Phil, if you've not got them yet, it's really worth getting a little business case together as to that return on investment.
Is there on your website or the Buckinghamshire First one, do you actually recommend solar installers or not?
We have to be very difficult because we are on low carbon ERDF funded. We have to be very careful who we promote and can't promote, only one supplier. What I can do is send you a good list of suppliers we've worked with previously on the programme that have supported many other businesses, and therefore, of course, we've seen the value of their work. Equally, Phil, I'm quite happy on that one to have a conversation with you separately to see if I can assist you.
Yeah, when you search on Google, there's hundreds of people that do solar panels, and it's a bit of a minefield.
And honestly, Phil, that again has come about in the last 12 months, and it's really good that you're being cautious there. MCS certification, that's one we always look for. So as a standard, if you're getting solar, just see if they're MCS certified. You can go on the MCS website and type the business in. If they are, that's what you're looking for. To stay away if not, is my view. But again, more than happy to assist if you want a conversation offline.
Lovely. Thank you, Daniel.
No problem at all, Phil. Really great questions. Helen, hi, Helen.
Morning.
Good
How are
morning,
you?
Helen. Oh, very good. Thank you. Thank you again. I think, Helen, I think you've been at all of these events, so thank you very much.
I have a question.
Brilliant.
Could you recommend a simple but effective tool for measuring CO2 emissions for somebody starting out trying to do that first attempt?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So there are resources online. The difficulty is that the factors. So of course, energy use changes year on year, and the kind of what emissions come from each energy source. Those factors change. Put another way, if you use a kilowatt of electricity this year, it will be different next year. It'll be lower in carbon creation. The problem is many of these calculators are not updated. So sometimes businesses inadvertently are entering their details, and as a result, their figures are being lumped up artificially because it's on a very old factor. Now, of course, they're happy wherever you go, because they'll probably say, oh, we can offset that for you if you want. But that is the kind of the key difference there is, are those factors up to date? So we've worked with Climate Essentials previously in books through Boost Green, and with Net Zero MK, we followed suit. I'm a real supporter of that platform. You can sign up individually and pay. It's very cost effective. I think that they're a good company. That said, it depends how long one waits. It may be that something will come down the line that could suit that need for you sooner rather than later. But I appreciate how you've got to get moving, and you can't just wait on kind of a hidden little riddle like that. So what I can equally do, if you allow me to go away, I'd be more than happy to send you in the next 24 hours like 2 or 3 alternatives that I know exist that I think, you know, cut the mustard. They won't obviously deal with your supply chain. Helen, for yourself, you of course have a chain of restaurants, don't you? So I know you'll have elements there that it perhaps wouldn't capture, but to get a good scope and gauge on this, absolutely. I'll send them to you, Helen. Thank you for the question. Is there any other questions? Oh, Helen. Oh, it was like brilliant. Okay, well, look, it's 11 o'clock. Thank you so much, you four, for being so superb, and Megan, of course. We really appreciate it. And as I said, it is useful. It does go out to our whole community. So we are grateful. Any further questions, you've got my details. Doesn't matter what it is, please reach out, and we can help. Equally, if you're interested in low carbon funding, we can assist there. But Amanda, Mark, Phil and Helen, thank you very much. And I hope you have a wonderful.
Thank you. They've been wonderful. I've really enjoyed them. They've been really, really useful. I've got a heap of questions. I've just messaged you to say, can we chat? But
Amanda,
yeah,
honestly,
they've been so useful. Thank you.
Amanda, that's made my morning. So thank you.
Oh, bless you.
Thank you very, very much. I'm glad. Were we still recording there? Yes, we were. Fantastic. That's great. Fantastic, really brilliant. You're welcome,
Can I
Mark.
also just say, Helen, I've discovered your pubs. Aren't they lovely? As a result of this, I think you said on the very first one.
That's so nice.
And I mentioned to my sister, she was like, yes, I really want to go to the Black Boy. We went there for her birthday. They're lovely.
That's
so yeah,
brilliant.
big
Thank
fan
you
of
so
you
much.
now.
There we go.
You do
See, it works. The ripple effect, right?
Yeah,
the ripple
yeah,
effect.
exactly. Yeah. So
Brilliant. Thank you so much, everyone, and look forward to speaking to you all soon.
Okay.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.